It often begins in silence. No alarms, no sudden rupture, nothing that announces what is about to unfold. A child sits in a living room, perhaps 7 years old, watching the slow collapse of someone who is supposed to be a pillar. It may be a parent drowning in alcohol, or a father ruled by fury, or a mother so hollowed out by sorrow that her eyes feel vacant. The child does not need an explanation. Something instinctive, almost ancient, activates within that young mind. If I do not hold the pieces together, everything will shatter. And at that moment, something disappears. The child remains in the body, but a part of the self retreats into hiding. The disappearance is subtle. Instead of vanishing from sight, the child begins to vanish emotionally. They learn quickly which words calm the storm and which ignite it. They smile when they are tired. They swallow tears that feel dangerous. They begin to move through the house like a small sensor, scanning for shifts in mood, dictating the next outburst before it arrives. What once was a carefree child starts to resemble an adult compressed into a small frame. Teachers, neighbors, and even family might praise them. They are told they are mature, that they are responsible, that they are strong beyond their years. But nobody pauses to ask the most important question: what is the hidden cost of such strength? Psychologists give a name to this reversal of roles. It is called parentification, a word that carries the weight of stolen childhoods. Instead of being protected, the child becomes the protector. Instead of receiving care, they give it. Instead of being allowed to explore the world with curiosity, they manage the emotional weather of the household. It is not just unhealthy. It rewires the development of the brain. The child learns vigilance so deep that it becomes their default state. They anticipate threats, interpret silence as danger, and confuse safety with temporary calm. This vigilance produces what researchers call hyperawareness or hypervigilance. The child lives as though a predator may appear at any moment. Every sound, every pause, every expression is scanned for meaning. Love, if it comes, is no longer unconditional. It becomes a transaction. Peace is offered in exchange for survival. Needs are perceived as liabilities, so the child buries them. The buried needs do not disappear. They simply hide beneath layers of performance. On the surface appears the good child, obedient, quiet, helpful, endlessly capable. Beneath that mask waits the child who once only wanted to be held without condition. As years pass, the mask grows tighter. The child becomes a student praised for achievement, a teenager celebrated for independence, an adult admired for competence. Yet inside, the silent cry remains, why did nobody shield me? Why was I the one who had to carry so much weight? This hidden ache does not vanish with time. It grows roots into relationships, careers, and self-perception. Without understanding the origin, the adult continues to repeat the patterns that once preserved life but now corrode it. They may dismiss joy as undeserved. They may confuse exhaustion with accomplishment. They may crave closeness but recoil from vulnerability. And most tragically, they may never realize that the chaos they lived with as children trained their nervous system to believe that stillness is suspicious and peace is unsafe. Why would a child accept this impossible role? The answer is not a matter of conscious choice. It is biological. The human nervous system is wired to preserve connection because attachment ensures survival. A child will do whatever it takes to maintain closeness, even if it requires silencing their true feelings, even if it demands sacrificing play, even if it means absorbing responsibilities that belong to adults. This is not weakness. It is instinct. The tragedy is that the very strategy that secures survival in childhood becomes the prison of adulthood. The child, who once became the emotional anchor of a collapsing household, grows into an adult who struggles to feel safe. They may appear competent, but they carry a restless undercurrent. Calm feels unnatural, as though it cannot be trusted. Love feels like a negotiation, as though it will always require repayment. Support feels unfamiliar, as though leaning on another will expose them to abandonment. Even joy can feel suspicious, because somewhere inside lingers the belief that joy is fleeting, undeserved, and dangerous. Many who grew up too fast develop a stance of hyper-independence. They refuse help, not out of arrogance, but out of a nervous system that has learned that help is unreliable. They push others away not because they do not crave closeness, but because intimacy feels risky. They measure worth by productivity, not because they desire endless labor, but because accomplishment once guaranteed temporary safety. They numb themselves during moments of celebration because joy feels like standing on thin ice. These responses are not conscious decisions. They are echoes of the survival patterns learned as children. When dysfunction becomes normalized early, the nervous system interprets chaos as baseline. Stillness feels wrong, silence feels menacing, and love feels like a debt. Adults who lived through such conditions may excel in workplaces, friendships, and commitments, but privately they carry an H that refuses to dissolve. They become lovers who flinch at tenderness. They become professionals who never rest. They become friends who always listen, but never reveal. They become people who apologize for tears, people who dismiss compliments, people who confuse collapse with weakness and strength with suppression. The cost of growing up too soon is not merely sadness. It is complex trauma woven into identity itself. It does not announce itself as a wound, but hides as a personality trait. The perfectionist, the fixer, the high achiever, the quiet one. These are not natural expressions. They are adaptations. They are costumes woven in childhood and worn so convincingly that even the wearer forgets they are disguises. But somewhere within, the forgotten child still waits, whispering the question no one answered. Why did I have to be strong when all I needed was to be small? The first step toward healing is not rushing to fix what feels broken. It begins with acknowledgement. Many adults who were forced into responsibility too soon minimize their own stories. They tell themselves that it was not so bad, that others endured worse, that they turned out fine. But fine is a costume too, a polished surface covering a neglected foundation. To witness the truth without excuses is to remove that mask. Only then can the hidden grief begin to rise. That grief is heavy. It carries birthdays where no one noticed, holidays overshadowed by conflict, childhood moments where laughter felt unsafe. It carries the rage of protecting those who should have been protectors, the sorrow of dreams never voiced, the exhaustion of carrying burdens too large for small shoulders. To allow this grief to surface is not weakness. It is the sign that the frozen parts of the self are beginning to thaw. Tears that never had permission finally fall. Anger that once felt dangerous finally finds expression. Loneliness that was once buried is finally named. The inner child never disappears. They remain in the background, shaping choices and reactions. The adult may overfunction in relationships, always repairing, explaining, adjusting, and then wondering why resentment grows. They may become the therapist in friendships, always available to soothe others, but never daring to ask for the same in return. They may struggle to set boundaries, because saying no still feels like betrayal. These patterns are not destiny. They are strategies learned in one environment and therefore capable of being unlearned in another. Healing asks for courage of a different kind. It does not demand polished strength or relentless productivity. It demands tenderness toward the self that was abandoned. To sit quietly and ask, what did I need back then that I never received? Answers may come softly. I needed someone to tell me it was not my fault. I needed someone to notice when I was sad. I needed to play without guilt. I needed to be held without earning it. By offering these missing pieces now, the adult begins to release the compulsion to seek parents in partners, to confuse anxiety with intuition, to perform worth instead of living it. Carl Jung once observed that consciousness arrives through pain, and that people will do almost anything to avoid meeting their own soul. Yet the work of facing the shadow, the frightened, the ashamed, the neglected aspects of self, requires precisely that meeting. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before survival demanded disguise. For those who grew up far too soon, maturity was never the problem. The problem was the absence of choice. Childhood was compressed, innocence was stolen, and responsibility was forced into hands that were not ready to carry it. But adulthood brings something new, the possibility of choosing differently. You can choose rest over constant striving. You can choose softness over relentless strength. You can choose to stop performing safety for others and begin cultivating safety within yourself. This journey does not happen overnight. There will be days when you feel as though you are 7 years old again, scanning a room for signs of danger, rehearsing silence instead of truth, apologizing for needs that should never have been shameful. Good. That is not regression. That is evidence that the child within you is returning to the surface, finally visible after years of hiding. Welcome them. Let them cry without judgment. Let them laugh without guilt. Let them feel wonder without suspicion. The work of healing is the work of allowing that child to finally come home. It is not about rescuing some broken fragment of the past. It is about becoming whole. The strength you once wore, like armor, does not need to vanish, but it no longer needs to suffocate you. You can carry competence without erasing vulnerability. You can be responsible without abandoning joy. You can offer care without sacrificing your own needs. To do this requires patience, gentleness, and the radical acceptance that you were never meant to carry the burdens that were placed upon you. You never truly had a childhood. That truth is painful, but the absence of a past does not erase the possibility of a future. Every step into healing is a rewriting of what was once denied. This time you grow not through fear, not through pressure, not through the illusion that you must be unbreakable, but through honesty. You look at the younger version of yourself and say what nobody said: you did not deserve this. You were only a child. You are safe now. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to simply be. That is how the cycle ends, not through perfection, not through denial, but through presence. By turning toward what was abandoned, by allowing grief to melt into compassion, by choosing to live as a whole person rather than a mask of survival, you step into a new kind of adulthood. One where the breath is no longer held, one where peace is not suspicious, one where love is not a bargain but a gift. And for the first time, you are not merely surviving. You are finally living.